Hello, everyone, and welcome to Little Legends Podcast. I am your host, Blevins. With me, as always, is What's up, buddy?
I'm crying on the inside after that, but no, dude, you're getting better at that. The lung capacity is looking good.
Lung capacity.
Yeah,
I quit smoking, and by that I mean I was never smoking. But
yeah, good. Yeah, like the last time I smoked was my bubble pipe back when I was 5 years old.
I actually do have a real tobacco pipe, but I don't. I just smoke it to look cool, like.
Oh yeah, that's why most people smoke, I think.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. I gotta say it. I'm things that I could actually probably get in trouble for is promoting tobacco on. Today's episode brought to you by Camel
by Philip Morris.
By just in general big tobacco. No, kidding. Today's
Which in turn is sponsored by Jersey Mike's.
That's true. The parent company of Yum Foods.
Okay.
I don't know if Jersey Mike's is owned by Yum Foods. I should do some more research. Okay, so to bring us slightly back more on topic to the nonsense that we normally talk about, not actually about TFT yet. We're minutes away from talking about TFT. I found out that there's actually a Jersey Mike's in Buffalo.
Wow.
In the greater Buffalo area.
Have you gone? Have you ordered yet?
I haven't, but Deathblow has, who is who many of you may know from High Noon Podcast as well as from some TFT cast as well. Yeah, it's over by his house, and he was.
I love Jersey Mike's.
I've legitimately never been, and he randomly
it's good.
he randomly was like, he sent me a picture of Jersey Mike's, and I'm like, oh, did you see the episode or did you listen to the episode? And he's like, of what? Like he didn't even know that we talked about it. He just randomly sent me a picture of Jersey Mike's sub that he had.
It's a sign. It's a sign you have to go.
I definitely want to go at some point for sure. If I ever
come visit you, that's where we go.
It's the Jersey Mike's.
It's the Jersey Mike's, yeah.
That is the biggest waste of a trip to Buffalo. It's going to a Jersey Mike's. A place that is known almost exclusively for their food and might be the only redeeming quality of the area. Let's just go to a national chain instead.
So, again, minutes away from TFT. So, speaking of national chains, one of the first major trips my husband and I ever went on was a trip to Cancun. And he said, I love you for the very first time. Are you ready? At Hooters.
Wow.
Yeah. So we ate at Hooters and Chili's the first 2 days that we were there.
I have never been to a Hooters.
Really? It's actually pretty good. I like Hooters a lot, to be completely honest. No shame.
No comment.
All right. Now those minutes are over. Those minutes are over. Let's talk about that housekeeping.
Yes, of course, you guys know we are a prediction esports podcast, PREDICTION esports on Spotify and iTunes. Make sure you are leaving a review, liking, subscribing, all of that stuff. It really does help us. Make sure you do that. Also, make sure you're joining the Discord, discord.me/Little Legends Podcast. Best place to be. I guess this kind of leads into perhaps, and well, I don't know, maybe we don't announce this, but we game night is tentative this week. At least our inclusion in game night is tentative. If you guys want to go and show up to discord.me/Little Legends Podcast and play game night, feel free to use the Discord. I'm not sure if Boop and I or myself are going to be there this week. Stay tuned on the Discord and we'll let you know. But usually Fridays at 9 Eastern, play some games, have some fun. Last week was just, every once in a while the stars align and there's just a spicy game night. And it was one of them last week. It was really fun.
Yeah, I slept through last week's game night. I woke up and there was like a bunch of stuff in the game night chat. Can you give me the summary?
Yeah. So first off, for some reason, I just started saying Illaoi like over. I don't know why, just over and over again. Illaoi. So that was like the callback, and then the other callback. So this is going to be completely irrelevant to most people who weren't there, but this is, I guess, a subtle nod to be at game night because you miss out on these silly, stupid inside jokes. Long story short, the man, the myth, the legend, the at the very least former top 5 challenger player, Sphinx Boy, made an appearance. He's now too cool. He's now too cool for us. He has to like schedule appearances. But he was there and played with us, and for some reason, the show Code Lyoko got brought up. Do you remember that show on Toonami?
Code Lyoko.
It was like an early 2000s like 3D animated show on Toonami. And,
I never watched it.
Okay, it doesn't. The context of the show doesn't matter at all. But someone brought up something that made me think of that, and then I couldn't remember the name of the show. So I go, oh, remember that show where like it was like 3D animated on Toonami, and the kids like hacked in, and they were like superheroes in VR. And Sinks was like, oh, that was Code Lyoko. I love that show. And then started singing some like theme song that was like Code Lyoko, da-da-da-da-da. Like very clearly not the theme song to it. And I'm like, so then the recurring joke was just like, Code Lyoko. It's like just like every like iconic classic TV theme song with the Code Lyoko in it. Being like, yeah, that was the theme song. So, the type of thing that's not at all funny or relevant when you hear it in a podcast, but it's the type of thing that is gut burstingly funny when you're there. So,
well, I'm glad Sphinx could take time out of his busy schedule.
Yeah.
to grace us with his presence. Sphinx. Yeah, we're all better people.
Yeah, and honestly, it's a lot of.
He's my favorite. It's on the Discord.
It's true. It's a lot of what would colloquially be referred to. I got there. I speak for a living. Colloquially be referred to as ball busting, and just fun. It was just fun. Yeah. Oh, also. Not Infiltrator Malphite, IE Malphite from Danny Space Coast from Dot Esports was tearing up the lobby. So that was fun. But yeah, that was game night. Boob, any interesting or fun or exciting games for you this week? I've been playing a lot.
So do my placements, spread my time around. It was pretty busy over this last week with a bunch of other stuff, but I had a really crazy game where I had 4 blasters plus a mech. No synergies whatsoever, just blasters and mech.
Mech blaster build.
Yeah, the good old standard mech blaster. So this was funny because I'm like, I don't know why, but I'm like all in on like utility-based characters in everything I play right now. Like even in D&D, I have a guy who like barely does any damage, but has like so much like utility. Doesn't really support, but like changes the environment and stuff. Yeah. And I've been like super into that lately. So I was like, what if I make utility blasters?
All in Ezreal.
Yeah, so it was 4 blasters with sword breakers on 3 of them. And then just a mech. And so basically the sword breakers shut everybody off and the mech was just like swinging away.
Yeah.
And then I got 4th. But
hey, take those.
I think 4th for that was pretty cool. I didn't know what to do with my items and I was like, let's just try something new.
Yeah.
And because people are like, oh, it's all about just getting tier 2 things now, and I really, really tested that with the mech and 2 non-synergizing synergies. But I guess with items you can kind of make it work.
Yeah.
It was pretty cool. If Swordbreaker was like more consistent, then it actually probably would have been pretty brutal. It's just like once the mech pilots came out, there really wasn't any more like even further synergy.
Right. Yeah. It's just even worse than it already was.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Like, basically, once the mech is gone, you are too. But, I mean,
Yeah.
against the blasters, a tank in the front line, it was interesting.
Yeah. I sort of discovered, and by discovered I mean I do the voiceovers for the Giant Slayer TFT guides, so I get a preview of like what some of the best players are what some of the best players are making guides about. So I'm like, ooh, they did a Astro Sniper guide. Okay, let me try to play that. Oh, turns out it's like one of the best comps in the game. So I've been playing that, and then also the talk of the town, and we'll actually be talking about in the second half of the show is Vanguard Mystic. And what I found out about those two comps is that the items for Cassiopeia as well as for Teemo are 66% in alignment. Like you can use the same, like you want blue buff on both. You can use either Morello, like some other magic damage amplification item as the second item, and then you can run whatever on Teemo, and then you want RFC on Cassiopeia. So I found that my starts can be very much the same with those two builds. I also just by playing and like having those two comps sort of in the back of my mind in building or going into the game, I found that like I was ironically way more open to things, which is kind of weird because I went in with like almost like tunnel vision, but it ironically opened my mind because I like I had items for, or I was going in trying to build those, but I didn't get items for them. So when I got an early Jinx, I'm like, oh, these items are actually really good for Jinx. So I went into Jinx and I ended up making it ended up being an 8 Chrono plus Jinx game, and that was sweet.
Sounds sweet.
8 Chrono was pretty sweet. I gotta say it was fun.
I gotta say, that's just like being like, chocolate, pretty great. It's a pretty great thing. It's pretty great food.
I mean, it wasn't.
Of course, 8 Chrono's going to be crazy awesome.
Well, the thing is that like it's the same with it. It's the same with any comp, really. And I mean, it feels like I'm learning these things at like at the pace of a snail or sloth compared to like pro players who are like, oh, this just makes sense conceptually at the onset. I'm like, oh, just jamming 4 Mystic, 4 Vanguard only gets you so far. It's like taking the correct path to get there is just as, if not more important. So like the 8 Chrono game, I felt like I actually navigated the path. Like it's weird when you like are on the right. Like I did a very minimal amount of scouting, which for me is like a lot. Looking at other people's boards at all is a huge amount of scouting for me. But I'm like, this is pretty open. I'm like, I got this Jinx early. No one else is in Brawl. I've got Riven. I had like an early Riven. Riven is another one I want to talk about too, because I had some builds with her that were really cool. When I found out, or like when I read, or someone told me, or put it somewhere on Reddit, that Riven is an AP based tank, my horizons were broadened instantly. Like I had a really cool sorcerer build with her. So I'm rambling at this point, but I just found that like having an early base for like what I want to go, and like the items that the items I want for those builds, it not only sets me up to be in those builds, it sets me up for the inverse for when I don't have those items. I know I need to go something else. So that was I don't know. I felt like my last couple of games have been kind of meh because I think I overly forced snipers and cybernetics when they weren't actually open. But besides that, like my placements went pretty decently. So
that's good. That's good to hear. Oh, speaking of items, by the way, did you hear the new Galaxy got leaked?
No, I didn't. What is it?
It is going to be a Galaxy where you cannot build more than 2 items, is the rumor. So
total or on
cybernetics
each on
on
each?
each unit. So
Oh,
you
okay.
cannot build 3 items on any units.
So it's no, it's actually nothing like Wacky Game. That's interesting. That's actually really interesting because I think the standard I mean when you think about it, like how deep does a build ever go? It's like you put 3 items on like maybe 2 units or like 3 a 2 a 2.
Mhm.
Now it's like you can have 4 units with 2
Yeah,
different
you
items.
spread around the power a little bit more, right? Because it kind of
Yeah.
neuters your 3 item carries, and so it's on PBE right now,
It
apparently.
leaked through
So
the official PvE.
it leaked through the official PBE. No, so like I think the cool thing about it is it does spread it around, so people who normally don't have items might be able to carry them a little earlier
Yeah.
on. Like you're not just slapping items on TF because TF can carry every item at the early game.
Right.
You can actually like invest into some people, maybe like
Right.
the Aries out there,
Mhm.
right? That are like tier 2, tier 3 carries.
Yeah.
But since now you get to invest more power in there, I think that's pretty cool.
I think it is cool. And Adept in chat is saying that Cybers is busted, which makes sense. That's the level 1 like, oh, you just get to put 2 items on all of your Cybers and that's way better. That's way better utilization than any other comps get. That makes a lot of sense. My only worry is like I think about a game I just played with Cybernetics where I was 6 Cybernetics and it was like late game and I have this this I have just this random 1 cost unit that has an item on it because it's a cybernetic and like it just evaporates. Like it had a static shiv on it. It was a I forget who it was. It was it was Fiora. It was a Fiora that had a static shiv on it, like at like when everyone's level 9, and it's like it's just completely irrelevant. It just evaporates instantly. And I'm
Yeah.
wondering, I guess part of that is going to be reduced because your Jins that are one-shotting everything might not be doing that. But actually they still might be because like Jin, like the carry builds are generally 2 offensive items and 1 defensive
And a
item.
defensive item. Yeah. Like
So if they're
Rapidons, Jeweled Gauntlet,
Right.
Trap Claw.
Yeah. So if you want to go greedy, the kill power of these carries might not actually be changed from what we're used to. So I'm wondering if I'm wondering if that's going to change anything. I mean, it doesn't really matter because it's only one galaxy anyway, but it could be a fun one.
Yeah. Again, investing into some other carries would be pretty cool. Just to kind of spread the love, see some other character fantasies come out. Maybe Battlecast gets a little bit better because that is something else that, in terms of just like as we move on to like initial impressions of patch and stuff.
Yeah.
The two of us are lucky enough to work with Giant Slayer, so we get to see a lot of the stuff a little early, right? Like you said, like you get to do the videos, and with Fight Night, we got to see some of these earlier comps. So, what are your like impressions? Mostly for me about like the design of set 3.5 and how it kind of pertains to the overall health of the game, right? Because we've got a 1-shot 1-kill right now, which is weird. We've got a mana drainer, which I'm not a big fan of. But what about you? What is your kind of impressions of everything going on right now in terms of fantasy, in terms of just general feeling?
Right now, it feels fun and it feels good. The problem, I think, or not the problem with making a call this early is that it is exactly that. It's early. Like, how good was set 2 until people found out that you just run Blender or Azir? Or how good was set 1 until Kassassidon got figured out and broken? How good was previous set 3 until Candyland was dominating? I don't know if we've gotten to that point yet. We have seen, I mean, with the Giant Slayer series and the Giant Slayer Fight Nights, there is some stakes there. Like people are actually, players are actually incentivized to do well and to win, which is good. And I think that pushes it even more. And that might actually push it past the point where it's like, oh, just run Candyland, GG. It's like actually now you're getting pushed to that point faster probably, but then also push past that point where it's like, okay, you can push Candyland, but what's the counter to that? And I think
Yep.
the Candyland or the Assassin in the room right now is Vanguard Mystic. It was the Protector ASOL, but that got hotfixed, so no reason to cry about that anymore. But I think Vanguard Mystic is one that we want to deep dive on. So let's just do it. It is a build that has been theorized for a while now. I remember people were talking about it before, and really sort of Protector Mystic held that mantle beforehand, because with Protectors you can run Xin Zhao, and that's kind of a carry. Now we have Cassiopeia, who has a very cookie cutter, actually really strong build that can do damage, and you just don't die at all to pretty much anything except for true damage.
So I think that the dangerous thing about I think there's danger in having a carry character in the Mystic line, right? And I think that's kind of what we're talking about here is something like 6 Vanguard, 4 Mystic even fun in terms of thematics, fun in terms of health for the game, because I think some people would have opinions on that are pretty negative when it comes to what really belongs. You know what I mean? Right? Because I think what Cassiopeia does is she's actually pretty cool, right? In terms of her aesthetic, her fantasy, but when a comp like Candyland or 6 Vanguards, 4 Mystics is popular, is the game in a good spot? Right? And when it feels that dominant, when everyone is complaining about it, right? Are defensive oriented comps just healthy for games in general, I think, is my bigger question, right? Because I've always liked me some War of Attrition Volibear from set 1, right? But is that the best way to play this game? Probably not.
Well, when you say best, do you mean the strongest way or the healthiest way for the game?
Yeah. In terms of health, I'm not sure this kind of, all right, we have this excitement, this is feeling good. Oh yeah, Vanguard Mystics are what's great right now. Yes, we have Astro Snipers, which I think gives it a little bit more of that leeway in the mid, gets it back towards the middle.
Yeah.
But in terms of what we want out of it, did we get what we want?
Yeah, I think having a comp like that inherently isn't a negative thing. I don't mind a comp being we're just going to tank. We're going to, in other games it might be called turtling, and just make an indestructible force that just very slowly whittles you away with, a red buff or a Morello, or in Cassiopeia's case, the poison damage or whatever. It's fine. We're not super strong. We're gonna, we're just gonna survive really long, and over time we're gonna kill you. Inherently, I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Where the issue comes is like, what are the actual counters to this strategy? It's like, well, Vanguard's like, okay, what's the counter to that? Magic damage, great, easy way to do it. Well, Mystic kind of negates that. So like they kind of cover each other's backs in a lot of ways. So the only ways to do it are have some form of true damage, which I guess is like red buff or Morellonomicon, or Giant Slayer to an extent, or
like Last Whisper.
And Last Whisper would reduce armor. Like Last Whisper, I think, is the most effective way to do it, which is, again, in and of itself, not a terrible thing, is to have something that needs a counter, but like you are forced to build that. Like it's not that like there's nothing wrong with like, okay, well, the defense of Vanguard Mystics might be like, oh well, you can just build Last Whisper and you can shred through the armor, right? It's like, well, yeah, but what do I do? I guess you can run Paragon. Like, what do I do as another comp? Let's not Sniper, right? Like,
well, I think like the discovery process of that is what's fun about these like early game, like Wild West type of situations when it comes to post patch, right? But when it becomes when it starts feeling stale, right? I think a comp like this starts feeling stale way faster than another type of design, right? Like same thing with like Urgot, right? That's going to
Yeah.
get frustrating way quicker than
Well,
something else that's kind of like flying under the radar, right?
yeah.
Because Urgot doesn't feel, I think I forget who it was on Twitter, but someone was like, it kind of just reminds me of the old Phantom,
Phantom. I was going to say the
right?
same
And
thing. I don't
everyone
remember.
hated that,
Yeah.
right? And with Karthus and Kindred, and basically, if you guys don't remember, Phantom pretty much just I think took all the life away from somebody. I think it was
90% or something
yeah,
like that.
90%. So it was just pretty much the same thing as Urgot.
But it was
But
instantaneously at the beginning of the
yeah,
game.
yeah,
And it was
yeah.
a random yeah.
And one of the biggest other things that were complained about were hex techs, which were kind of like the same thing, right? In a sense where it's like,
Yeah.
all right,
It's anti-fun.
now you just don't have these things, right? It is anti-fun.
Right.
It's not very interactive.
Yeah.
And Vanguard Mystics doesn't feel the most interactive when it comes to comps. Urgot doesn't feel the most interactive. I mean, it feels interactive as you're eating somebody, but in terms of the grand scheme of things, it doesn't feel good to lose that way, right? And I think there is a world in the healthiest games when you lose, you're like, all right, cool, I feel fine about this. But when you lose to something like that, it never feels like you lost because of decision making. You get to kind of excuse yourself and say, "Oh, I lost because of Urgot."
Yeah.
As if that makes sense.
No, I know exactly what you're saying. And I almost, because like the counter argument is like, well, I mean, you can position against Urgot, right? Because he only eats based on his attack range. So you can do some like maybe some clever clumping or whatnot. But that gets kind of thrown out because right now, late game, high level play is being dominated by not Urgot himself, but Thresh pulling in an Urgot who triggers the Urgot almost instantly, if not instantly. And then the Urgot is pulled into the middle of the battlefield and eats something instantly. That's the problem. Yep. And again, like at late game, if your giant carry or even any one of your carries or item holders gets eaten instantly, what's the difference between that and Phantom? I'm actually curious to hear what the answer to that is or the rebuttal to that, because I think Urgot himself, I think you can tweak numbers, you can make his mana cost more, you could I don't know, make it so that he like it will eventually kill them, maybe make it kill them slower, or that they can still attack out of it and still do something with it.
Before we get too deep, another reason why the Thresh versus Urgot thing is a big deal is because Urgot might be able to grab aggro if he's in the field already by an infiltrator or something.
Right.
But if Thresh pulls him in, he's most likely not going to have aggro on him at that point, and actually could get a more consistent ultimate off on a more high value target. Whereas the interaction between Urgot and Thresh is interactive.
There's no shortage of action going on at our exclusive partners, betonline.ag. Sports are slowly making their way back, and BetOnline is leading the way with the best odds and lines for all UFC, NASCAR, boxing, and soccer matches. And if you need even more, they have simulated NFL, NBA, and UFC simulations all day, every day, live on their website. Looking for something else other than sports? BetOnline has hundreds of casino games, poker tournaments, and prop bets to check out. Visit betonline.ag and use the promo code BlueWire for a free welcome bonus. That's one word, BlueWire. BetOnline, your online wagering expert.
Right? The way that it kind of like the result of it still doesn't like quite feel skillful.
Right. No, and again,
I think skill expression doesn't seem very high.
Right. I think the Urgot Thresh conversation paired with the Vanguard Mystic conversation of like, okay, well, you could build Shroud of Stillness or something. You could build Shroud of Stillness and play Infiltrators to maybe counter the Thresh like super hard, or kill an Urgot if it's not pulled by a Thresh early, and kill the Thresh and or the Urgot before they ult, because of like something like Shroud of Stillness and like Infiltrators immediately jumping on them. The problem is that I think that goes back to a conversation we had back with Kassadin, was like, Yeah, I can Zephyr the Cassassin, but like it's not enough sometimes. And also something like that where it's like, oh well, you could be playing infiltrators.
Hmm.
What if I'm not playing infiltrators? This is like round 86 and we've got 15 units apiece. I can't just
Well,
pivot into two
yeah.
infiltrator. Maybe you can. Maybe that's something that we're missing as a community. Maybe that's just something that hasn't been explored. Is like, okay, you can actually like save some gold and roll for like Z2 plus I don't know, a Fizz. Like having Z2 and Fizz is just like utility units that you keep no matter what the comp is and just put them in later to snipe something. Maybe that's something that we're just not doing as a community. I'm just saying, I'm just pulling this, out of thin air. I don't know if it's actually good or whatever. I'm just thinking. Like maybe that's something we need to do, but like that's very much counter to what the standard play is right now, and maybe that's what we need to do. But I'm not. You'd have to test it, right? It's not like you're gonna go 6-star Guardian Sork comp and then be like, okay, let me just throw this level 1 Zed and this Fizz in. That doesn't seem like
Well, and I think like a
strong
lot
enough.
of times the response to something like this is more along the lines of, well, actually, this is the counterplay, right? But I think the greater conversation actually comes into, even if it isn't actually unfair, right? It still feels unfair, and I think that's a valid thing,
Yeah,
right?
to an extent.
Maybe the stats are like, well, actually, like on Reddit, well, actually,
Yeah. Well,
and you get well actually by somebody, but in the end, like even knowing, oh, I know this isn't the worst, right? Or I know this could be more imbalanced, or the stats say that it is actually pretty 50-50. It just still doesn't feel that fun and interactive, right? There's a very big difference between when Sejuani used to ult back in set 1 and you were
right.
frozen, right, than getting eaten by Urgot.
Yes. You're right. And I think that is valid to an extent. I think if it feels broken or imbalanced, that is definitely valid. It to an extent. Like you can't be like, oh well, you know, getting a Poppy and a Leona in the first round just feels imbalanced. Like, well, actually, it has absolutely no bearing. Has no relevant bearing to how you finish the game whatsoever. Then it's like, okay, well, just shut up, Reddit. Like, you don't know what you're talking about. But if it's like, you know, there's certain metrics that you can look at. I mean, you can look at different metrics for different things, and it can paint a very different picture. This also
Hmm.
ties back into the I think something we touched on last week is that like the game currently it's my understanding that it is balanced around it's balanced as if two computers are playing or 8 computers are playing against each other. So like the thing that you're mentioning, Boop, like the stats don't necessarily bear this out as overpowered, but it feels like it is. Wouldn't be a factor if we're understanding correctly. And I don't want to put words in, more or the other designers and the team's mouths. That's what I believe was said on his stream. So take that for what it's worth. But that wouldn't be factored in. So like, yeah, something like Urgot, it feels overpowered. It feels bad for it to happen. But if the stats bear it out that like it's actually not that much better than running like an Echo or something like that,
Hmm.
that's something to talk about as a community. I mean, that's the type of thing that like no one's complaining about Echo right now. Maybe Echo's better. I don't know.
Well, and the other thing about it is, I think with Urgot too, there are some very I think there are directions that you can go to make it feel a little bit better, but then he just starts to suck, right? And I think
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of like where Bard kind of is you can find a place for Bard. Yeah, he can get you to level 7 really quickly if,
Yeah.
you land on him really early on,
Yeah.
yada yada yada. But the I think the greater question um for me when it comes to ah, man, it's actually like just so hard to actually think about because there's so many other details, right?
Mm-hmm.
You gotta make so many people happy, and yeah, you're doing this as a computer, right? Or you're doing it for computers going off against each other. But there are just some things that are fun, and some things that aren't fun, and
Yeah.
if they aren't fun, that's a valid opinion to have.
Yes.
Right. You just have to like back it up with details as to why. And I know Mort listens to it, right? Because he comes in. We had a Protector Aesol like wipe 4 tier 3 Blade Masters, and he gets hotfixed the next day. Right. So
Yeah.
I'm not saying that that's the reason why he gets hotfixed, but he obviously is really, really responsive to it. Right. And the last thing I want Urgot to is to, all right, the community is upset, let's nerf him. And then all of a sudden he's just a useless 5-cost unit.
Right.
Right. And
Yeah.
that's the, I think, biggest danger when it comes to adjusting champions like Urgot, is you can fall into that hole pretty quickly, where it's like,
Yeah.
all right, well, if you don't want him to be, if you're saying he's not fun and interactive, well, the only other way I think we can actually patch that and to make this better is to just make him bad enough to take him out, right? Like, there isn't a world where Urgot's a mid-level character, in my opinion.
I think you could get creative with it. Like, if you're assuming that he has the same sort of alt animation, right? Like, you're not going to have him use a different Urgot ability. I mean, you could do it so that, like, it's way reduced mana cost, and then he pulls, but he pulls super slow and does, like, the damage over a way bigger time period or something like that. Like,
yeah,
or
or
like,
in the game, he fears people around him after he eats somebody, so you can
okay.
add CC, but like that's a pretty big redesign.
Yeah, that's a big like, if you're just looking at the knobs that are currently on Urgot and like turning those, it's like you can make it not an instant KO, just have it do a bunch of damage, but then that just feels lame, right? Like, that's just
then
like
you get
not
pulled
the
in and you're like,
you're just like standing next to Urgot awkwardly.
Yeah,
You could I think, like, you pull them and then, like, maybe it goes slightly slower, like it goes at half the speed, so if it would normally take 2 seconds, it takes 4 seconds instead to pull them in, and then also allow them maybe to attack, because like right now you technically die after you get pulled in, but you're dead the second you get hit, right? Like, the unit is dead. It's not doing anything. It's not attacking. It's just its fate is sealed unless the Urgot dies. And then you can adjust the, like, health and mana pool and all those, like, knobs. But those are, I think, like you said, if we're just adjusting those knobs, then he's either good or he's not. There's not a he's either overpowered or he's not. Like, I mean, you can make him like really squishy and like make it so that he needs an item to do well. But then again, he either is overpowered or he's useless. Like, it's very, I think it's tough. I think it's a tough type of ability. Like, an instant kill is a tough type of ability to really balance around. So I don't.
Yeah, I mean, it was, it's their decision to put it in the game, right? So
it's cool, right?
Yeah. The fantasy of it is great, right? The sound effect is cool.
Yes.
I wish he was maybe this is where you make Urgot take up 2 spaces. Maybe this is where that happens.
Yeah, but does that doesn't solve the problem of Thresh pulling him in, right?
Yeah,
that's
true.
I don't know. I mean, maybe they could change that interaction potentially, of like, just make a, like, Urgot can't. I don't know. I'm not gonna try to balance Urgot. I'm not a designer.
we'll try our best to, like, think about what some good options are.
Yeah.
But I think the moral of the story is, in terms of design, I'm not sure having anything close to what Phantom was in set 1 is a good idea, no matter how cool the birthday cake or the candles look.
Yeah.
Right?
I just, like, conceptually, I really hate to, put any type of ability into a, like, locked box and say, oh, don't put that in the game. Never put anything that kills stuff in the game, because it's like, okay, it's like, I just imagine the monkey's paw, like a finger going. It's like, never put anything that kills units in the game. Monkey's paw, and it's like, all of a sudden you're missing out. It's like, I'm thinking, like, and I'm sure the designers are thinking the same thing. Is like, we're thinking about this set, we're thinking about next set, we're thinking about does TFT exist in 5 years? And maybe they're not designing for 5 years from now, but like you don't want to, paint yourself into a corner with things and saying like, you don't want to say, oh, well, we'll never make a unit that steals mana. Well, because it's like, okay, well, you're just like removing a knob that you can change removing a dial that you can adjust later. So it's tough. I do agree at some level, at least, that like putting something that's close to Phantom in some ways in the game is certainly risky, and potentially at the very least like controversial to players. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I like Urgot as a unit a lot. I think I can see how it would be frustrating and in the late game, and it's like, well, my opponent has Thresh and they pull Urgot every time that they just win. But I mean, is it really that much better than pulling in any other 5-cost unit? Maybe Thresh itself is the problem. Maybe like is Thresh pulling in Echo that much worse? Is Thresh pulling in Gangplank that much worse, etc.? Urgot is obviously the most flashy one because he, makes the big sound and he pulls the unit in and they die. Exactly. It's awesome.
Yeah. No, I mean, like, it looks cool, but that's like, again, right? Like Michael Bay's movies look awesome, right? But when
they make billions of dollars.
They make billions of dollars, billions, which is Elizabeth Warren's favorite show. I don't know. I saw that on the Daily Show or something like that.
I found out that my favorite movie is racist today. That was an inside joke.
On that note.
We were supposed to take a break at some point, but I'll just edit in the break later. Any other words on Urgot or Vanguard Mystic? So I've got one other like pseudo topic that we can talk about for a couple minutes too.
No, not really. I think because what that leads more into is just like, okay, well, if we're going to talk about Urgot, we also have to talk about, spat items and making, ASOL a protector, and whether having spat items is a good idea because they're either bad like they are right now, or some of them are going to be way more overpowered than others, like Infiltrator, blah, 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 right? Like we can find a ton of things to complain about, but in the end, I think the devs are really reactive. I just wanted to have this conversation to see where you are in the greater community as a whole in terms of, are we, like a check-in, right? Are we enjoying the current direction of design choices? Not just do we like galaxies, right? But do we like this? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I think it's good to kind of check in because my answer is a resounding yes so far.
Yeah.
I just hope that we don't rely on just like really cool thematics to like shoehorn certain abilities into the game, which I don't think is necessarily what's happening. But things like one-shot, one-kills and mana drain on ASOL and having certain things interact with Protector are a little bit scary. Like definitely seeing a little bit of power creep going on. And that's a scary thing for any gamer, power creep. So just wanted to check in and just see what everyone else thought, because I was also casting that Giant Slayer thing the other day, and that's Primal was like, this is my favorite set ever. 3.5 is the best, and I had a great time. We had some really great games, and I like it. Like, and I hope what I'm saying doesn't just come across as like overwhelmingly negative, because I do actually really, really like the set. The question is like, I'm thinking about like next set. Like, what are we learning from this? Right.
That's
and
true.
what lessons can we take, just like we did from, the elemental maps into this map, these maps, to our next whatever it's going to be.
Right. Yeah, I think they made the decision, and I think it's overwhelmingly a thumbs up, to make 5 costs feel relevant. I think maybe Xerath is the one that's like, I'm not throwing him randomly into my comp, and I'm not. If I throw him randomly in my comp, I'm not feeling great about it. Every other one, I mean, Lulu, Urgot, Thresh,
because
feel good.
Even it's so funny to me. It's just so funny to me how something like Urgot feels so imbalanced, but something like Lulu, which can do almost the same thing, right? A
Ooh,
Zephyr
busted.
or Polymorph,
Yeah.
right? Like, but Urgot's the one that's like getting all the hate. When I think like Lulu also deserves her own discussion.
Don't touch my Lulu. I loved Lulu in set 1, and I love Lulu in set 3. Low key, one of my favorite champions.
I taste purple.
Yeah, I think I like the fact that 5 costs are all good.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that this is the case now. It was more so the case at the beginning of set 3 when Gangplank was super strong and it was Rebel Gangplank all the time. It was like just fast 8 and get to like we see like the ends of the spectrum. It's one is every game is fast 8, just roll for 5 costs and play the ones you get, and the other end is everyone hyper rolls and plays the hyper roll comps. Like those are the two ends of the spectrum. And I think right now we're leaning maybe a little bit. I think we're maybe a little bit past halfway in the middle, which the middle is like both hyper roll and fast 8 comps are relevant plus other stuff. I mean, it's not really it's not just a linear spectrum. There's a lot of stuff. So the metaphor doesn't work perfectly, but I think we're a little bit closer towards the fast 8, but like you can do slow rolling, you can all in at different points. You don't have to necessarily hyper roll. You can fast 8, you can go to 9 a lot of times. Like the 5 costs all feel good, but I mean, with maybe the exception of Thresh plus Urgot specifically, I don't think anything feels broken inherently. Now there's some comps like if you get the full Sorcerer Star Guardian comp, yes, your Janna is going to feel broken in that comp.
And it should, because you've done the work to get there.
Exactly.
Yeah, right? And I think, again, to bring it back to Urgot, that doesn't feel like you're doing the work, right? You did the work, I guess, to get XP there, but, you know, he does have some... I saw Blade Masters do all right. Like, if you can burst him down, that's good. If your Urgot takes your Urgot, that's fine, right? Like, there's definitely... I think maybe we leaned a little bit too far into counter positioning type of champions, right? Ooh, like what if we have this? It would cause this person to constantly have to move this, right? Like Blitzcrank type of champions.
Yeah.
And maybe we're, I think, hitting the point where, all right, like maybe when it comes to positioning, like I think we could take like 1 or 2 more of these kinds of champions, but I think we're getting to the line.
Yeah, because at some point, once you have too many, you might as well have none. It's like, well, if they have something,
whatever, anywhere, right?
I'm just gonna leave all my units on the bench and let the computer choose where to put them, which I have done multiple times. It's very fun to do that, especially when it wins.
Oh, that would be a fun, wacky game.
Ooh, that would be a fun, wacky game. Actually, maybe we'll try that next time. I think just to kind of put a cap in it, because I think we're running it. We're talking in circles now and saying the same thing over and over again. And I think we're in agreement that the set right now feels very good. Feels very fun. It feels like there are a number of different strategies. There's some strategies that I think would be considered an S tier or an A tier, but I don't think they're not in a league of their own, right? Like I've gone Vanguard Mystic multiple times and not gotten first. Like, again, it's part of the path to get there is just as important as the final comp. Like all that stuff and positioning and scouting and et cetera, all the basics that we've been talking about for a long time now are still relevant. But, you know, Vanguard Mystic is a good comp, and I think you need to have that in mind and be cognizant of that as a possibility when you're making the decisions up to there. It's not just like, oh, well, this comp counters my comp and that stinks. It's like, well, did you think about that comp as a possibility at all? No. Well, maybe you deserve to get countered. Like, you don't win every game you play. There are 7 people who don't get first place every single game.
Bruh. But I'm perfect. Right. Every time I lose, it's someone else's fault.
Right. Exactly. I mean, that's the case for me.
Like RNG just effed me.
Guys.
RNG just effed me. It wasn't me. It's just the RNG.
Exactly. But there's one other topic that I kind of wanted to talk about a little bit, but we're at pretty much time. We don't need to necessarily go into it. Is there anything else, Boop, at a high level that you want to talk about before we go?
No, not really. Again, just checking in. right? It's good to have
check
these
in.
conversations. It's like a post-mortem,
Yeah.
right? Even when things go successfully, you have to talk about, oh, this could still go better. That's the thing about like casting or learning music, right?
Yeah.
It's a thing that'll never actually be perfect,
Right.
right? But you're constantly striving to get it there.
Yeah.
And it's good to have some expectations, but so far my expectations are high because they've been doing such a good job so
Yeah.
far, right? That we can have these conversations where we're not being like, yo, this whole synergy or class sucks, right?
Yeah.
We're talking about like specific champions, right? Specific interactions. And, we're getting into the nitty gritty there. And the fact that we're talking about that stuff rather than, old school, like, wow, the game is too short, right? Like I'm
Right.
dying way too quickly,
Right.
or that kind of stuff is a good thing, and so that's why I feel good about where everything's at right now. And I've had a blast watching people play this patch.
Yeah. I'm at I think we're at a spot where we both are confident enough to put out the critiques because we know the core of the game, and the game is actually in a really good spot. And we also are content creators and have to talk about something. So let's nitpick and do like complaining about little things for an hour. So I think that was it's good. It's good to have these. I mean, this is one of our. I don't think we went off the rails as much as we have in some of our other episodes, but it's definitely a nice little check-in, a nice little TFT Set 3 retrospective here. Brought to you by Boop and Blevins. Boop. Anything else before we go here?
I swear I'm going to start streaming. It's going to happen this week. I know.
You've said this 1,000 times.
I know, but like I've actually got stuff down. I emailed Twitch that was like, hey, can I have Boopasaurus back? Because I don't want to be Boopasaurus 1. And I'm going to go online tomorrow playing TFT, hopefully around noon. Is the idea. So if you're listening to this on podcast, it's whatever tomorrow is for you. But other than that, you can find me at Boopasaurus Rex on Twitter.
Yes, and you can find me at _Blevins on Twitter. Just join the Discord, discord.me/Little Legends Podcast. That's the place to be. Also, Spotify, iTunes, anywhere you can find podcasts. YouTube as well. You can see my brand new setup and my standing desk setup and all the stupid toys I have in the background and my awesome pineapple shirt I'm wearing this episode. If you want to see all those awesome things, head over to YouTube, look for Little Legends Podcast. We are there. But everyone, thank you for listening and for watching. For Boop, I'm Blevins, and we'll be back next week to talk about some more TFT here on the Little Legends Podcast.